Imagine for a second that you have it all. I mean, everything. You're famous, you're wealthy, you have a family that loves you, and you're a literal literary genius. And then, one day, you just wake up and realize none of it matters. This is the incredible and true story of Leo Tolstoy's desperate search for the meaning of life, right after he'd achieved everything he ever thought he wanted.
Have you ever found yourself just staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. asking these exact questions? You know, the big ones? What is the point of all this? Well, it turns out these are the very same questions that completely haunted one of the greatest writers in history and pushed him right to the edge.
So we're talking about Leo Tolstoy, the guy behind absolute masterpieces like War and Peace and Anna Karenina. And by any measure you can think of, the man was a colossal success. He had tons of money, a massive farm, a career that people would kill for, and a big, loving family. On paper, he was the guy who had won at life.
But then, right at the peak of his success, around age 50, something just broke. All of a sudden, everything that had felt so important now felt completely hollow. This deep, dark sense of meaninglessness just took over, and the life he'd so carefully built just seemed to evaporate, leaving him with this terrifying, echoing emptiness.
And look, this wasn't just a case of the blues. We're talking about a full-blown existential crisis. The life that he used to love suddenly felt totally pointless. He started questioning everything, like a little kid who just won't stop asking why. Why should I live? Why should I write? Why do literally anything if we're all just going to die in the end?
It got so bad, so intense, that he actually wrote about hiding ropes so he wouldn't be tempted to hang himself. His only real escape was sleep, because it was the only time he got a break from that constant, agonizing search for an answer that was just eating him alive. He genuinely believed something was fundamentally broken in his soul.
But here's where the story takes a turn. Instead of just giving in to this despair, Tolstoy did what he did best. He used his incredible intellect and decided to go on a quest. He was going to find an answer to the meaning of life, and he started by turning to the greatest thinkers and the sharpest disciplines humanity had to offer. So he dives into two main areas, but you know what? Both of them were total dead ends. First, he hits the books on philosophy, studying everyone from Solomon to Socrates to the Buddha, and what did he find? They all basically seem to agree that life is meaningless suffering and that death is probably better. So he turns to science. But that was even worse. Science just told him that humans are basically an accidental clunk of particles with no inherent purpose. Reason, the one tool he trusted his whole life, had completely failed him.
Feeling completely lost and out of options, Tolstoy remembered this old Eastern parable that he talks about in his essay, A Confession. It's the story of a traveler in a really bad spot, and for Tolstoy, it became the perfect metaphor for his own terrifying situation.
And this story just illustrates his mindset perfectly. He saw himself as this man dangling from a fragile branch, which is life itself, inside a deep well. Up top, there's this beast of his existential dread chasing him, and at the bottom, a dragon waiting to eat him, which is, of course, inevitable death. So what's he doing? He's licking these few drops of honey off the leaves of the branch. Those drops are the little pleasures of life, his family and his writing. He's just trying to distract himself from the terrifying reality of his situation.
Okay, so since the books and labs offered him nothing, Tolstoy shifted gears. He stopped looking for answers and abstract ideas and started looking at actual people. He began observing his own circle, the wealthy, the smart, the aristocrats, and he realized they all seemed to cope with life's meaninglessness in one of 4 ways.
But none of these options worked for him. First, there's ignorance, just pretending the problem doesn't exist. He couldn't do that. His mind was too active. Then there's indulgence in pleasure, which is basically just licking the honey. It's a temporary distraction, not a real solution. He actually saw suicide as a path of strength, a way to end the silly joke, but he just couldn't bring himself to do it. And that left the 4th path, weakness. Just enduring, doing nothing, stuck in a numb paralysis. That's the path he saw himself on, and he thought it was the most pathetic of all.
So, after hitting a brick wall with every single intellectual path he could think of and finding no real answers among his peers, Tolstoy's breakthrough came from the last place he ever thought to look. He turned his attention away from the rich and educated folks and started watching the poor working-class peasants on his own land.
And right there, that's where he had his revelation. It was like night and day. He saw that his intellectual friends used reason to pick life apart, and all it did was lead them to despair. But the peasants?
They faced way more hardship, way more suffering, yet they lived with this incredible sense of purpose and strength. And their secret? It was a simple, unshakable faith. They didn't reason their way through life, they believed their way through it.
And that was the key that unlocked everything for him. Tolstoy realized that reason, his most trusted tool, was limited. It could only deal with the finite, the stuff we can see and touch and measure. But a truly meaningful life, he decided, needed a connection to the infinite. Faith was the only way to do that. It was the force that could give meaning to our short, temporary lives by connecting them to something eternal, something beyond the death and suffering his rational mind just couldn't get past.
Now, this wasn't just some neat little idea he wrote down in a journal. This realization sparked a radical, complete, top-to-bottom transformation of his entire life. He didn't just accept faith as a concept. He decided he was going to live it with everything he had.
He completely renounced his fancy, aristocratic lifestyle. He started living more simply, he dedicated himself to serving the poor, and he began giving away huge amounts of his money, which, you can imagine, his family was not thrilled about. He basically traded his life of intellectual fame for a life of humble service. And in doing that, he finally found the genuine peace and contentment that all his success and money could never, ever buy him. For the last 30 years of his life, Tolstoy was guided by this new conviction. He passed away at the age of 82, not as a famous author in despair, but as a man who truly believed he had found his answer. And he didn't find it in his own brilliant mind, but in a simple, profound faith in something bigger than himself.
Tolstoy's journey is just this incredible reminder that even the person who seems to have everything can feel completely lost, and that sometimes the answers we're looking for show up in the most unexpected places. So it kind of leaves us with a big question to think about for ourselves. What's the thing, the belief, the purpose, the connection that gives your life meaning?